Here's what they don't tell you about catching your husband cheating. The shock isn't actually the worst part. The worst part is realizing you're not even surprised. My name is Jennifer. I'm 32. I work as a marketing director at a Fortune 500 company, and I was married for 6 years to a man I thought I knew. Turns out, I didn't know him at all. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. I had what most people would call a good marriage. My husband Daniel and I worked in the same industry, marketing, which meant we understood the crazy hours, the competitive pressure, the constant hustle. We'd met at an industry conference back in our 20s. He was ambitious, smart, charming. We dated for 3 years, got married, bought a nice house in the suburbs outside the city. We traveled to Europe every couple years. We had couple friends. We looked happy in Christmas photos. The thing about looking happy is that it doesn't actually mean anything. About 6 months before everything fell apart, I started noticing small things. Nothing dramatic. Daniel was staying late at the office more often. He'd say he was handling a difficult account. He complained frequently about not moving up fast enough at work, about other executives getting credit for ideas. He seemed frustrated, restless. I should have trusted my gut. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. It was a regular Tuesday afternoon when my entire world shifted. I was in my home office, which was basically a desk in our second bedroom, doing something completely routine. Every quarter, my job requires me to audit departmental system access logs. It's boring IT stuff, but it's necessary. It keeps track of who's accessing what company information, when they're accessing it, and why. That afternoon, I was reviewing the logs for my marketing division when something flagged in the system. My husband had accessed 3 client strategy files, critical ones, that he had absolutely no legitimate reason to see. These weren't files he worked with. These weren't files relevant to his position at all. And according to the access timestamp, he'd pulled them about 3 weeks ago. I remember sitting there, staring at the screen. My hands went cold. At first, I thought maybe there was a system error. Maybe he'd asked me to pull something and I'd forgotten. But no. I checked my emails. Nothing. I knew exactly what files were in my division because I managed them. He shouldn't have access to any of them. Then I got curious. I searched for a pattern, and what I found made my stomach drop. This wasn't a one-time thing. He'd accessed these files multiple times over several weeks. And each time, he'd accessed them in the evenings after normal business hours. That detail kept running through my head. Why would someone legitimately working on something access it at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday? That's when the first real thought crystallized. What is he doing with these files? I sat there for about 20 minutes trying to convince myself there was an innocent explanation. Maybe he was working on something he hadn't mentioned. Maybe there was a good reason. Maybe I was overreacting. Then I did something I'm not proud of, but I don't regret either. I searched for his emails in the shared company system. Here's the thing about corporate email: managers have access to certain archived files for compliance purposes. It's not snooping, it's literally part of administrative oversight. And there, in his folder from about 3 weeks ago, I found an email chain. The first email was from him to someone named Sophia requesting temporary access elevation to specific client files. He'd told the IT department that I had requested it, that I needed him to pull some information for review. I never requested anything. The second email was Sophia's response, thanking him for the files and saying, and I'm quoting directly here, "This changes everything for my pitch to the VP." Sophia was a brand manager. She reported to my division. She was someone I'd actually mentored 2 years earlier when she started at the company. And she was apparently using stolen strategy documents in presentations to executives. That's when I realized this wasn't just about Daniel being careless or sneaky. This was organized. This was strategic. He was helping her steal proprietary information, and she was using it to advance her career in my division. I kept reading. The email chain went deeper. There were dates. There were file names. There was a pattern of information transfer that had been happening for weeks. And then I scrolled through his archived emails more systematically, and that's when I found the other stuff. Messages between him and Sophia that had nothing to do with work. Messages about meeting at hotels. Messages about weekend getaways. Emoji usage that made my face go hot. I sat back from the computer and just sat there. For a long time. The betrayal hit in stages. First, the hurt, a sharp physical pain in my chest. Then, the anger hot and fast. And then, something else entirely, cold, crystalline clarity. I wasn't destroyed. I was angry, sure, but underneath the anger was something sharper. Something strategic. Something that sounded a lot like, "Oh, you want to play this game? I'm going to show you exactly how outmatched you are." I closed the browser windows. I made a cup of tea. I sat at my kitchen table and started making a list. This wasn't going to end with a screaming confrontation or a messy divorce. This was going to end with documentation so complete, so airtight, that he'd have no room to wiggle. That was going to end with consequences he never saw coming. That was 6 months ago. I didn't confront him that day. I didn't cry. I didn't even tell him I knew. What I did was think. And plan. And gather everything I possibly could. The first thing I did was call a divorce attorney. Not because I definitely decided to leave him, though looking back, that's probably what I should have decided right away. I called because I needed legal advice and I needed someone smart in my corner immediately. I explained the situation to the attorney, and she said something I've never forgotten: document everything. Don't confront him until you've protected yourself legally and financially. So that's what I did. The corporate emails were step 1. I printed everything: the unauthorized access requests, the information transfer emails, the messages between Daniel and Sophia that made it crystal clear this wasn't a one-time mistake. I printed it all systematically and organized it chronologically. I made copies and locked them in a safe deposit box at my bank. Then I went deeper. I pulled his company credit card statements through the expense system. I had legitimate access to review departmental spending for budgeting purposes. What I found was infuriating and also, somehow, perfect evidence. Over the course of about 4 months, there were hotel charges. Lots of them. Hotels in Boston, New York, upstate resorts. All charged under client entertainment. The Mandarin Oriental charged $2,100 for a weekend stay. Versailles and Balthazar, high-end restaurants, showing repeated charges. All of it was supposed to be business expenses. All of it was completely fraudulent. I documented everything. I even found a charge from last weekend when he said he was at a mandatory training conference. I happened to see him leaving the office with Sophia on a Friday afternoon around 2 p.m. He definitely wasn't at any training. He was probably at that Boston hotel that showed a charge that exact weekend. The amount was staggering when you added it up. Around $8,000 in fraudulent corporate expenses. That's not a small mistake. That's not a judgment error. That's deliberate deception. Then I found the financial element that made everything click into place. I looked at our joint bank account, something I had every right to check as a joint account holder. There were transfers I didn't recognize. Several payments going to what looked like a shell account. Not huge amounts individually, but consistent. Maybe $300 here, $400 there. It took me a while to track what it was for, but when I figured it out, I nearly threw up. He was using our family money we'd saved together, to pay for hotels and dinners with another woman. Money I'd earned was literally being spent on his affair. That's when something shifted for me. This wasn't about betrayal anymore. This was about fraud. This was about theft. This was about him violating my trust on every possible level, personal and professional and financial. I spent the next week methodically gathering everything. I created detailed spreadsheets with dates and amounts. I screenshotted everything I could. I printed statements. I organized files. I created a timeline that showed a clear pattern of deception spanning months. And here's the thing, I didn't rush this. I spent about 2 weeks just gathering and organizing. I wanted to be absolutely certain I had everything. I wanted to be so prepared that there was no possibility of misunderstanding, no way for him to gaslight me or minimize what he'd done. During this time, I told exactly 2 people, my best friend Marcus and my divorce attorney. Marcus was shocked but supportive. My attorney reviewed everything and said the words I needed to hear: "You have a very strong position here." I also made a decision that changed everything. I reported the professional violations to corporate compliance. Not as a jilted wife, but as a director concerned about data security breaches. I filed a formal report about unauthorized access to client strategy files and fraudulent expense claims. I presented it as a business issue, not a personal vendetta. And technically, it was a business issue. The fact that my husband was the one perpetrating it was almost secondary. Within days, and I mean within actual days, compliance launched an official investigation. They pulled the same access logs I'd pulled. They reviewed the emails. They looked at the expenses. They interviewed Sophia. They found everything I'd found, plus more things I hadn't even discovered yet. By the time they were done, they had a complete picture. My husband and my former mentee had systematically breached company data security and committed expense fraud. They'd also violated company conflict of interest policies because their relationship meant they were in a position of professional power over each other. The company's legal department got involved. They consulted with external counsel. And they made a decision. This was serious enough that they were considering referring it to law enforcement. I was the one who triggered all of it. But I did it through the proper channels. I did it as a professional. I did it in a way that was completely justifiable. And I was ready for what came next. Once I'd reported the professional violations to corporate compliance, I had a decision to make. I could wait to see what they did. Or I could move forward with my own plan. I chose to move forward. My divorce attorney walked me through everything. First priority was protecting my assets. The house we'd bought together was worth around $520,000. I had legitimate ownership interest in it, but I wanted to make sure there was no possibility of complications. We filed paperwork to ensure I'd maintain primary residence after the divorce. We also protected my retirement accounts, around $200,000 in a 401k and some investment accounts. We made sure all of my income going forward would be separated from any joint account. I moved $40,000 from our joint savings into a separate account that only I could access. My attorney said this was smart, not vindictive. I had a legitimate financial interest in protecting myself, and doing it before a divorce filing was actually the responsible thing to do. Meanwhile, I was preparing for the confrontation. I didn't tell Daniel any of this. He had no idea that compliance was investigating him. He had no idea I'd filed a report. He had no idea I had complete documentation of his infidelity and fraud. He was going about his life completely oblivious. I made my confrontation plan carefully. I wanted to do this in a specific way for a specific reason. I wanted him to understand that I wasn't just upset, I was thorough. I was prepared. I had thought this through completely. I decided to confront him at home on a Thursday evening. That gave me a few more days to prepare mentally. I printed out key documents. I organized my evidence. I made 3 separate folders, one with the infidelity evidence, one with the fraudulent expenses, and one with the professional violations and security breaches. I also prepared myself emotionally. I practiced staying calm. I told myself I wasn't here to scream or cry or beg for explanations. I was here to present facts. I was here to show him exactly how thoroughly I understood what he'd done. The week leading up to the confrontation, I called my attorney one more time. I told her my plan. She said, "You're sure about this?" I said yes. She said, "Good. Once you do this, there's no going back. The confrontation is going to accelerate everything." I understood. I was ready. I also prepared for what would happen professionally. Compliance had mentioned that they expected to complete their investigation within about 2 weeks. That meant termination decisions would likely come around that same time. I prepared myself for the possibility that the company would fire him. I prepared myself for the possibility that they might refer this to law enforcement. I prepared myself for the reality that his career, at least in this industry, was probably over. Here's what nobody tells you. Preparing to destroy someone, even when they absolutely deserve it, requires a certain kind of emotional strength. You can't go into it angry. You have to go into it calm. You have to be strategic. You have to be able to separate the personal betrayal from the tactical execution. That's what I did. The morning of the confrontation, I woke up and felt nothing. Not numb, exactly. Just clear. Like the emotional part of my brain had stepped aside and let the logical part take over. I texted him that morning and asked him to come home early. "We need to talk," I wrote. Classic message. His response was, "Uh-oh, did I forget an anniversary?" He had no idea. I spent the day at work normally. I went to meetings. I did my job. I did not show any sign of the bomb I was about to detonate on my marriage. At 5 p.m., I left the office and drove home. I set the kitchen table. I laid out my 3 folders. I made tea. I sat down and waited. When he got home about an hour later, I heard him call out, "Hey, I'm here." "What's going on?" I called back, "Kitchen." "Sit down." He came in looking concerned. "What's wrong?" he asked. He was trying to figure out if I was sick, if someone had died, if something had gone wrong. He truly had no idea. "Before you say anything," I said carefully, "I want you to know that I know about all of it. And I have proof. So let's not waste time with denials." The look on his face in that moment, confusion shifting to realization shifting to pure panic, I'm never going to forget that. "What are you talking about?" he said. He was already trying the gaslighting approach. Classic. "Sophia," I said flatly. "The hotels. The restaurants. The stolen strategy files. All of it." I watched him. For a second, just a fraction of a second, I saw the calculation happen behind his eyes. He was running through scenarios, trying to figure out what I actually knew versus what I was guessing. "Jennifer, you're being paranoid," he started. "Don't," I cut him off. "I'm not being paranoid. I pulled your access logs from the company system. I have documentation of you requesting files you had no business accessing. I have your emails to Sophia about that exact information. So we're not going to do the denial thing. We're going to do the honesty thing." I opened the first folder and slid the printed emails across the table toward him. He stared at them. His face went from pale to slightly green. "Where did you get those?" he asked, and there was panic in his voice now. "From the company email system, which, as a director, I have access to for compliance auditing, which is literally my job." I kept my voice completely level. "They're dated 3 weeks ago. You asked IT for access elevation to files marked director level only. You told them I'd requested it. I didn't. Then Sophia thanked you for the files and said they would help her pitch to the VP. That was taken out of context," he started. "Was it? Let me show you more context." I opened the second folder. The hotel receipts. The restaurant charges. The timeline of fraudulent expenses. I laid them all out. He stood up. "Sit down," I said quietly. And he did. He actually sat back down. "The Mandarin Oriental, Boston, March 8th through 10th, I read off. You told me you were at a training conference. You charged $2,100 to the corporate card. Marked it as client entertainment. That's fraud, Daniel. That's literally fraud." "It wasn't," he tried. "It wasn't what?" "Let's see. Per se on February 23rd, $480. Balthazar on March 1st, $520. You've done this dozens of times. Dozens. And it all adds up to around $8,000 that you stole from the company and spent on her." I watched him trying to find an escape route. There wasn't one. "I also know about the money from our account," I continued. "The transfers to that shell account. Roughly $300 to $400 a month going to pay for your affair. My salary was paying for hotels where you slept with Sophia. Do you understand how that feels?" He didn't answer. He just stared at the papers in front of him. "Here's what happens now," I said. "I've already reported the professional violations to corporate compliance. They're conducting an investigation. They have all of this evidence. They're already interviewing people. By Monday or Tuesday next week, they're going to come to a conclusion about what you did. Jennifer, please, I can fix this." "You can't fix this," I said. "You knew what you were doing was wrong. You did it anyway. That's not a mistake that gets fixed with an apology." I opened the third folder. The compliance report I'd filed. The documentation of the data breach. The security violations. "As of right now, your access to the company system is flagged. You won't be able to come in tomorrow. By Monday, compliance will likely recommend your termination for cause. That means no severance. That means no reference letter. That means this stays on your professional record." He looked like he was going to be sick. "Professionally, you're done. At least in this industry. Everyone knows everyone in marketing. When they find out you were terminated for espionage and expense fraud, nobody's going to hire you. I let that sink in for a moment. As for us, I said, I've already consulted with a divorce attorney. I'm filing papers on Monday. You'll get the notice from my lawyer. The house stays with me. My retirement accounts stay with me. You get approximately $30,000 from the joint savings after my costs are covered. And you'll be responsible for your own legal fees. You can't do this, he said desperately. We can work through this. People make mistakes. People do make mistakes, I agreed. But you didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. You chose to cheat. You chose to steal. You chose to put someone else's career advancement above your marriage. You chose all of it. So now you're going to live with the consequences of those choices. He tried to reach across the table toward me. I pulled my hands back. I'm going to spend the night at my friend's house, I said, standing up. By tomorrow morning, I want you packed. You can move in with your parents or find an apartment. But you're not staying in this house. Jennifer, please, he tried again. I picked up the 3 folders. I'm done listening. My attorney will be in touch. Don't contact me except through your lawyer. I walked out of the kitchen, grabbed my phone and my purse, and walked out of the house. As I was driving to my friend Marcus's place, my phone buzzed. Messages started coming in. Daniel calling. Daniel texting. Daniel begging. I put my phone on silent and kept driving. Everything I'd prepared for had happened exactly as planned. But the real consequences were just beginning. The next 48 hours were chaos, but it was controlled chaos. Daniel tried calling my attorney. He tried reaching out to mutual friends. He tried everything to undo what had been set in motion. It didn't work. He couldn't undo what I'd documented. He couldn't argue with evidence. By Monday morning, corporate compliance sent him a formal letter placing him on administrative leave pending investigation. By Wednesday, they'd completed their investigation and sent termination paperwork. Termination for cause. No severance. No reference letters. Clean break. Sophia's termination came a day later. She'd also violated company policy. She was offered the option to resign in good standing rather than be fired, which was actually more generous than Daniel got. She took it, and by Friday, she was gone. The divorce moved faster than I expected. Daniel's attorney immediately recommended he settle rather than fight. The evidence was too strong. His negotiating position was non-existent. My attorney hammered out a settlement that was honestly more fair to him than he deserved. But I wanted this done, not dragged out. 6 weeks later, the divorce was finalized. The settlement. I kept the house. I kept my retirement accounts. I got $35,000 from joint assets for my legal fees and costs. He got roughly $20,000 in remaining liquid assets after his legal fees were paid. Clean split. Professional consequences already done. What people don't tell you is what happens after. The social fallout is interesting. Our couple friends? About 11 of 12 stayed friends with me. The one couple who remained close to Daniel did so quietly, out of a sense of loyalty to his friendship, but it was awkward. Our neighbors noticed him moving out. By the next month, the rumor had spread he'd been having an affair and I'd caught him. The specifics got distorted, but the basic narrative was accurate. For him, the social destruction was swift. He became essentially invisible in our friend group. Dating attempts didn't work. Apparently women Google everything now, and fired for expense fraud and affair doesn't help your dating profile. By month 4, he was essentially isolated. But here's the thing, I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I would. Don't get me wrong. I don't regret anything. But the satisfaction I expected, the feeling of perfect revenge, didn't arrive. What I felt instead was just relief, clarity, freedom. A year later now, I'm in a completely different place. I got promoted to VP of Marketing around the 6-month mark. The fact that I'd caught the data breach and handled it professionally actually enhanced my reputation. My salary jumped to around $240,000 annually. I'm being recruited by other companies for even bigger opportunities. I completely renovated the master bedroom, new furniture, new aesthetic, fresh start. I rebuilt my savings to around $70,000. I actually have peace of mind for the first time in years. Socially, I rebuilt my friend group. My core friends and I are closer than ever. I joined a book club. I went to a concert solo and didn't feel sad about it. I went on a coffee date with someone in July, a divorced architect. It didn't lead anywhere, but it felt normal. Healthy. Last I heard, Daniel's still working at that junior position he took. Still trying to climb back, but every employer does a background check and sees termination for cause and doesn't dig deeper. He moved back home with his parents for a while. When he tried to date, the story followed him. Apparently someone posted about the situation anonymously on Reddit, and it resurfaces whenever anyone Googles him. Sophia is in Portland now doing something in a different industry. She made a clean break and rebuilt from scratch. And me? I'm thriving. Better job, better financial situation, actual peace of mind, maintained friendships, and zero guilt about how I handled any of it. Do I regret it? Not for a second. I trusted my gut, I documented everything, and I let the evidence speak for itself. I didn't destroy him, he destroyed himself. I just made sure there was documentation of exactly what he'd done. That's the real power move. You don't need revenge when you have the truth.